We have. Oh. No. Oh my. Oh. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome everyone for our first budget public hearing on this, what is today's date, 13th of August. We don't have our pastor here to get started with our invocation, so I don't know. Pastor Tom, if you'd like to do the honors.
Lord, we give you praise, we give you thanks for the gift of this day. We thank you for this moment. These are important things that we're discussing this evening, so we ask for your guidance and direction. Thank you for all the work that has been done to bring us what we have before us tonight. Just thank you for this city, all of its people. Just ask for your continued blessings as we progress and go forward together. Give you thanks and praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Tom. Those who are able, join me with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, first item on the agenda is begin our work session budget. Was there any guidance on this as first item?
Yes, if I could, Mayor, I'd like to point out a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to before we get started. Or I guess as we start, some things that I want you to note specifically in the budget. First, I will draw your attention. Well, first I want to touch on the summary letter that I had provided to you at the last meeting prior to your actual receipt of the document itself. And there is on the page XI, page 11 of that budget summary. You guys hear me okay? If you look up at the second paragraph, really the kind of the 3 lines down, expenditures in general fund include 5 new positions. That's a miscount on my part. I failed the second grade math. There's actually 6 total, including the Main Street director. Everybody see that? So I just want to point that out before we get past that. And then if I could, I'd like to direct you to, and I'm going to touch on these things first, and then we'll just go however you guys want to go. The general fund revenue on page 8. If you'll look there at account 4372, and you see in the far right hand column is the 2019-2020 proposed number of $80,000. Since that number was placed in for revenue, you guys actually adopted an amendment and some addendums to the SRO agreement with the school district, which will increase that number by $54,500. Okay, so you'll see a change in that SRO revenue number when we present as we finalize this budget going forward. And like I say, that's a number that's already been accepted and that document's in place. And then if I could take you to the general admin expense budget, which which is page 11. Turn the page, you should see that on your right-hand side. If you look down at the 58 teen accounts, 5814 through 5814-15, down toward in that bottom portion, you'll see there that in the far right-hand column, we have some numbers that reflect exactly the same numbers as last year's budget. And that's not a mistake, and it's not necessarily a recommendation. We put those in, basically just filled the numbers in as what I'm gonna call a placeholder, so that those expenditures were in the budget, that we do not intend or expect that those will be repeated exactly like they were last year. In fact, I know that one of these, at least one, the Frontier Trails did not even apply this year. So what we tried to do is to mimic the dollars that were committed to our nonprofits last year. And as I think some of you may know, I know Doyle and Reagan are on the committee. We have not brought you yet the recommendations for those nonprofits, but I think we need to do that, probably, obviously, before we finalize this budget. But I believe based on the response that I've heard from Reagan and Doyle, the numbers sound like they're gonna be pretty close to what we have. And of course, we can adjust that, through an adjustment in 5818, the unallocated reserves number if we need to, because I think that's gonna be, based on the information that I'm hearing, it's gonna be a really very small adjustment, like maybe a couple $100 or less to the total that's dedicated for non-charitable, or for charitable nonprofit funding. So I just wanna point out that when you see the number look exactly as it was in the previous budget, that's why that was. Those decisions have not yet been made yet, because obviously they're gonna be your decisions when those recommendations are made. The standing issue pertains to the funding for the Senior Citizens Center, and a contract that's somewhere north of 40 years old, that I think probably needs to be reviewed closely, and then we'll see how that works going forward. I intend to sit down with the senior citizens folks and kind of hash that out and review that, discuss that again. I'm not necessarily proposing dollar changes, but I do want to sit down and visit with them before we move. And I think that was kind of the thing, and I don't want to speak for Doyle or Reagan either one, but I think that was one of the things that was kind of holding that up was the fact that we had that outlier.
Well, Mr. City Manager, I'm here and I'll be glad to talk to you anytime.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so, as a result of the revenue changing for the SRO, I'm gonna direct you forward to page 19 to the street department account. And if you note in my budget summary, there was a reference to a street sweeper that had been struck. And I wanted you to see the strikeouts because I wanted you to be able to recognize the things that, as we began to really make final calculations as they were, we had to make some change. We had to cut some things out. And the street sweeper was one of those things. However, when we realized that additional revenue from the SRO agreement had not been added to the budget yet, we were able then to make some internal decisions that I'll sort of bring forth as recommendations, that we go back and look at how we can best utilize that revenue. And I know that our street department was very committed to the street sweeper and the need for the street sweeper, and I think many of, if not all of you are too, and I certainly would support that. And so what we will propose at this time is that use of that additional revenue we will use then to carry on our commitment this year for the new street sweeper. So those are really the notes that I had made that I wanted to point out initially and specifically. So that being said, I'm available to do this however you guys want to do it. If you want to just
sweeper on the summary page was valued at $250,000. And the additional revenue you said was 54K, so where's the offset?
It'll be a finance, our recommendation will be, most of the equipment purchases that we got in this budget will be financed for various terms of expected life and depreciation. So we anticipated the street sweeper at about a 5-year payout, and that's why that expenditure is shown like it is. And of course then, there will be related revenue and expense accounts that will also show, kind of like an auditor would do, where you're gonna show the revenue for that loan, so to speak, and then a full expenditure of that loan that will offset each other, and then the actual cost of the budget this year is the one that you'll see in the line item by the department, so, if that makes any sense.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, page 19, which line item did you say the street sweeper will go
It's
on?
under equipment, I'm sorry, Commissioner, or Councilman, no, it's 5706 under
Okay.
equipment. That's where you'll see that additional 50 put back in there.
Mayor and council members, if you'd like, I'd be happy to give you the summarization and the recommendation of the nonprofits committee, if y'all wanna tackle that at this point. I brought the copies, if anybody needs a copy of the actual applications that we received, I brought the ones that we would have for your review. And let me just keep one of these, and well, let me keep 2 or 3, because a couple of guys over here need some. And this is essentially just a summary of our recommendations. Let me hand these down, I'll be right back. Reagan and I were the committee, and we did follow the procedure, took applications, I think back in March. The committee did meet, I think, three separate times. We received the original applications, reviewed them. If there were questions or we needed more information from the applicants, we gave them opportunity to respond, give us more information, a little more detail, whatever, things like that. As you can see, if you'll look at the bottom of this summary page, the first thing I wanted to note is that there were 3 prior recipients that did not make application this year, and we had 3 new applicants. And you can see the dollar amount's gonna change considerably more than Mr. Criswell alluded to. And if you add up the columns on that page 11 in the 5814 columns, the dash 01s through the dash 14s of all the ones that are listed in the budget as assistance to nonprofits. Last year, that was $111,629, and our recommendation this year is only $102,348. So that's a excuse me, that's a reduction of $9,281 from if you compare item to item. But there again, remember there were 3 applicants that we funded last year that did not apply. We had 3 new ones, but the request that we funded is a little bit less. And so it would be our recommendation that we just plug these numbers in place of the ones that are currently placeholders on our budget, and that would reduce that projected outgo expenses by a little over $9,000, which may be helpful somewhere else as we talk about setting ourselves up for this year.
Dole, do you want to go down the list and kind of say each one, just so
Sure.
public knows, I guess?
Okay, we had an application from Addiction Recovery Ministries. Their request this year was for $7,500 $4,500 for support for education and job training in the Ted Oliver Learning Center, and $3,000 for building repair in their proposed women's center. The committee's recommendation is to fund the $4,500 they requested for the education program. Backpack Buddies at First United Methodist Church requested $12,000 in assistance to purchase food. The committee is recommending $10,000 to them. That's a $1,000 increase from what we supplied last year. CASA submitted an application for $5,000, and that was for personnel and volunteer advocates training, and we recommend funding that, $5,000 for CASA. Center of Life requested $20,000, $4,925.50 for their GED program, $7,099 for their benevolence program, $3,600 for their homeless program, and $4,375.50 for their uplift work program. The committee's recommendation was to fund $5,000, $2,500 toward their GED program and $2,500 toward the uplift work program. Change, which was a new applicant this year, Change submitted an application for $10,000, $9,500 for current programs assistance, which are education and service resources, and $500 toward general administration expenses. The committee's recommendation is to provide $2,648 in assistance, $164 toward their GED program, $484 for their empowering programs, and $2,000 for meals and classes. Children's Alliance Center requested $5,700 for utilities, maintenance, and local operations costs, and we recommended funding that, $5,700. The Paul Lawrence Dunbar Community Center made an application for $4,800 for utilities and insurance. Unfortunately, their application was incomplete, and we were unable to recommend funding for that. Meals on Wheels requested $10,000 for purchase of meals for their home delivery program, and we recommend funding that $10,000. The Mineral Wells Youth Sports Association requested $10,000 for security enhancements to better protect their improvements, and the committee recommended $5,000 toward that. This was another new applicant. This is the organization that has taken over what was the Optimist program. New Haven Ministries was a new applicant this year. They requested $20,000, $10,000 in assistance, fuel assistance to operate their delivery trucks, and $10,000 supplement to the Tarrant Area Food Bank. We recommend $5,000 to New Haven Ministries, $2,500 for fuel, and $2,500 toward the food supplement. And the Mineral Wells Senior Center, we just carried over the numbers that are on the line items currently listed. It's $30,000 for operations and $2,500 for maintenance.
I have a question. You may be able to answer this, but
Sure.
for the line items like the senior center and the Children's Alliance Center, where it says we're funding operations, since this is a program where the nonprofits have to show evidence of receipts, like what do the receipts on operations look like? Does that make sense?
Sure, it's utility bills, phone bills, internet service, things like that, and they do provide a very detailed summary.
Thank y'all both very much for doing that. That's not a pleasant task.
You're welcome. It's not hard. I wouldn't call it unpleasant by any means. The unpleasant part for me is not being able to do more.
Absolutely.
But I certainly don't mind going through the process and being involved in that. take a vote or do anything about this, but, it would be the recommendation of the committee that we just authorize the city manager to, change those numbers to fit this year's applicants and the recommendation. And I'm sure we'll have another opportunity, another round at this, but it would be my suggestion that we approve plugging those numbers in for further discussion.
I have a question, Randy. This is more for you right now. This was the budget that was given on the 30th. This one right here came in the folder. Are we going by this one, or are we going by the one that we got last week that looks like this on the front?
That one. Yeah, that one.
There's quite a large discrepancy between the two.
Well, the first one was, you weren't here.
Right.
I don't believe you were here, right? Yeah, we had some technical difficulties with that document being in front of the council that night until basically after the presentation was over. So there were changes being made and printing being done at the time.
Yeah, it was off by about $400,000 at least. And I came and picked it up since I got back and was going over it, but I just want to make sure that we're not using this budget.
Can I ask a question? We'll have a housekeeping point I think we need to just check into, and then a question. On page 26, special assessment debt, it has, we have a lease income from the two properties for Noma, which is Southwire, and I believe that the council voted to allow them to have that property. So could we just, I don't think they need to be on there anymore, but could we just check on that?
Yes, we sure will.
And then my general question is, I guess we're about to embark on the building maintenance study.
Yes.
And I see that we do have a new position dedicated to building maintenance. But could you address the matter of where in the budget, if at all, we have slotted any funds to start working on the buildings that, on the items that may result from that study?
Not a whole lot, Councilwoman. There are some places as you look through the budget under line items called building improvements or improvements other than buildings, where we typically have funding available to do minor repairs and things like that to the budgets or to the buildings. We weren't anticipating at this point where to put those dollars because we don't know where they're going to go. And so this budget is basically compiled to allow that study to occur and the time that's going to be necessary for the results to be presented to y'all, and then a plan of action to be developed, and then I think probably moving forward we'll see hopefully some commitments financially to those improvements. I can tell you that they have started that process, and so far they spent one day looking at some of the facilities out the activity center and gym. I don't think we got a very good grade on the condition of those buildings yet, but it was really hot. Maybe they were just irritated to be out there. No, just kidding. But, anyway, no, we're not anticipating. We didn't put a bunch of money aside right now for that this year because that's going to take some time, and you guys are going to have to. Hopefully, that report, when we see that, will generate the type of information that we need to really plan going ahead. So this budget is really nothing more than what's been done in the past, which is a budget best you can to anticipate what you're going to have to do that year, with a couple of exceptions. There's an air conditioner budgeted for this half of the building, and I'm hoping that everybody will clap when we get rid of it.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, there are some things in this budget that are special, but nothing really anticipating the results of that study. And I would point out that the total allocation to the nonprofits in the budget, if you add up those numbers, and they're not all exactly reflective of the previous year, but that total allocation of the budget is is $219 less than the recommendations from the committee, so that's easily, it's easy to do with
I have another question. I usually start when delving into finances, I try and get a high overview first, and just make sure I'm on the right page. So, first book, obviously, we're not using, so this is our budget. Can you justify where the funds came from on the fund balance? If you're looking at the general fund balance summary, I'm going back to the current budget right now, which is the 18-19. Our estimated fund balance was 2.946 million. And yet, we start over this year, which is within a month of that date, at 3.5 million. So I'm trying to figure out where that $500,000 or $600,000 came from.
You're talking about estimated fund balance as it exists today?
That's correct. So the 18-19 budget, current budget we're on, we started in the general fund with 3.5 million, and we estimated the ending of the year, fiscal year, September 30th, to have 2.9 million for this current year. So that's less than a month away, and yet I have us starting out in the general fund with 3.5 million. So I'm trying to get justification where that $500,000 went, or where it came from, basically. If it wasn't spent in the 18-19 budget, are we under budget by $500-something thousand? Am I tracking?
Well, the numbers that you're seeing for fund balance going forward can be nothing more than a reasonable estimate at this point. We don't know what that is on September 30.
Right, well, I'm talking about the current, this is the 18-19, the current budget we're on. We started in that general fund with $3.5 million on 9/30/2018, and then we estimated ending that same fund at 2.9 million. So that's less than 30 days away. I'm trying to understand how we're starting right now with our fund balance estimated at 3.5 million, because we're pulling a ton of money from that fund balance, or from that general fund, into our not unallocated reserves, from the, what do you call it? The allocated appropriated fund, thank you. So I'm just trying to justify if we're under budget by $600,000 this year, or how do we justify that? We're starting with 3.5 million. I'm trying to figure this out, because this has happened, and I went back a few other years, I've seen the same thing. So I'm just trying to understand, well, do we have 3.5 million in our general fund that we're playing with, or?
I can't tell you what's in there right now, Mayor, but I can tell you that this budget historically has been compiled with an anticipated use of fund balance by the end of the year. And so if you're looking at an estimated fund balance of on 9/30/2019 of 3.5 million, then that would indicate to me that the numbers that we have currently are not showing that fund balance will be dipped into between now and the fiscal year. I'm not really prepared to answer that question, but that would be my speculation right now.
Well, I know for me it's critical for figuring out percentage of budget when I'm going through each of these departments. So if I can get that answered fairly soon, that would be appreciative, so that I know where we're sitting. Because if it's as it states in our current budget, if we're under $600,000, then that would really indicate that we don't need to be raising taxes. So I need to find out where we're sitting on a fund balance and
I
why.
know there are a couple things I can think of off the top of my head that would probably affect that. I know typically in the past we've been very conservative with the income projections for the next year. So I think there are probably some places where we've had a little bit more income. And then also I can think of several, I know we've had some positions that have been vacancies, salaries that haven't been paid out. There were some nonprofits from last year that actually ended up not applying for all their full funding. So I mean, I think there are lots of little things that add up to that.
Well,
I mean, I would certainly much rather see us end up with $600,000 more than we projected than less.
Well, it becomes important because we're starting off our budget by spending more than we're taking in.
Well, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just trying to say it's estimates. So those are kind of some of the things that were variables for us last year. that
Right.
played into it.
Right, and we have the estimates every year based on the fiscal year, and we should be able to calculate, I mean, we're within 2 months of this number. We should be able to know exactly how much we have in that fund, I would think. Is that
No,
correct?
you don't ever know that, Mayor. Your fund balance changes from one day to the next in this, in government. Your revenues come in every day, your expenditures go in every day. Your fund balance is nothing more than a snapshot in time of what happens to be unallocated and uncommitted at that particular moment. Literally.
All right, I'll bring up some more questions later on that. Then I guess if I stick with this and say we have 3.5 million and we're budgeting to spend more than we take in, I'm just trying to understand what our reasoning is in that. This is for council, this is our budget workshop, so I'm just trying to understand.
What changes would you recommend to alter that? I mean, we'll start with that conversation. I mean, if you wanna cut something, what is it?
Well, we have, if we're going to staff and we're presenting to staff that they need to come back and bring us a budget that is within budget, I think we start from there and see what they come up with.
No, I think the staff would look to us to say, what do y'all wanna cut? Because this is the staff's, basically the staff's draft of their recommended budget. So they wanna hear from us and through us, the people, what, you know, what do you wanna cut? And I think we've been waiting for that answer for a long time. What do you wanna cut?
I don't think you actually have to cut first. You look at all the other avenues you have for revenues. It's not just based upon, sales tax and your property taxes, which that's the reason I would like us to have a discussion up here about what we can do. Are we happy with budgeting for more expenditures than we have in revenues? It's been a common theme the last 2 years. So if that's normal, if that's business, then I wanna understand the reason behind that.
Well, it's just like, kinda like a household, if you want to do more than, you have currently income coming in, that might be okay as long as you have savings, which is the fund balance.
It may not be normal, but it's the current times for me. I haven't been up here a long time, but I've been in the city a long time, and I've seen the result of us not investing in ourselves. So I'm certainly not opposed to us investing in ourselves, and I think we've started a good thing, and we need to, we have to be careful how much we do, but we need to continue to do a little bit for ourselves, because we didn't for a couple of decades.
I think if you'll go back and look, 6, 7 years ago, that fund balance was quite a bit bigger than what it is now. We always wanted to make sure we had a good enough cushion. That, having that there, that kept us from having to have layoffs and things about 6, 7 years ago when cities were really struggling and having to do that. And so it's only been in the last few years, like you say, Doyle, that we've decided we've kinda gotta dip into that a little bit so we can get some things done, so.
My question is, where do we go first? Do we just go first to dip into savings, or do we look at making the tough decisions and seeing if there are any other revenue streams out there, or if there's services that we can get by without, or materials or maintenance? So, and I mean, if you're going by this, if you added the difference between our expenditures and our revenue, we'd have to increase taxes 13 cents on the property taxes to keep up. And like I said, this question would be answered if I knew where the 3.5 million is going, because it shows that it should be gone, and we pulled from, in the 18-19 budget, we pulled from the general fund and we basically pulled from our savings and started our budget last year with an extra, I don't know, $400,000 or $500,000, I don't remember exactly.
Well, I won't be able, I'm like, Mr. Criswell, I can't give you that number until this fiscal year is audited, but I do recall our last fiscal year audit, we were somewhere in the vicinity of $500,000 or $600,000, in the black at the end of the year audited.
And Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things if I'm looking at this incorrectly, tell me. Okay, we're projecting 3.5 as the fund balance starting off at the beginning of the year, which is a projection because we're not there yet. And we plan a budget for expenditures in the general fund, 13.9 million. That's exactly a 25% funded, which is really, 22 to 25% is where we wanna be. Is that correct?
For fund
That's
balance?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's-
25% for a quarter of the year.
Yes, that'd be a very reasonable target, very customary. And I can tell you this, I don't believe that the intent is to dip into savings first. I would argue that comment. The intent would be to do the best that we can to prepare the most accurate and best budget that we can, which we have done. That is what I believe to be justifiable and necessary. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't think there's anything in there that isn't necessary. And to say that we're going to dip into savings before we start, that's not, in my opinion, an accurate statement. In the event that fund balance is needed at the end of the year to carry on whatever function it is that we are still carrying on, a year from now, in September of 2020, that's when your fund balance may come in as a necessary item to conduct those business, to conduct your business. And so this is not starting a budget negatively. I would disagree with that comment.
Okay, well, it looks like it is.
Show me,
So,
just for my, I'm
taking
curious
this-
where you're seeing that.
okay, so looking at the current year budget on the 18-19, said we used our fund balance appropriate on the revenue side, $553,316. Basically, if you take your expenditures minus your revenues, that's where that number comes from. So did we not use any of our fund balance appropriated for 18-19?
I don't know. I can't answer that. Doyle was just saying that the last audit he remembered showed $500,000 in the black at the end of the year, which would indicate to me the answer to that would be no.
So if we're not using that, then why would we raise taxes or consider raising taxes? That's what I'm trying to understand. Especially if we're
Because we have to maintain a fund balance for emergencies. We have to have that 90 days of operating to fall back on, cause none of us knows what tomorrow's gonna bring.
Right, but in this current budget, y'all, we estimated that we would be $600,000 short, and that was acceptable for the last budget, the current budget we're working on.
I don't understand your question.
In the current budget we're at, we started the year at $3.5 million. We pulled about $500,000 out and put it in fund balance appropriate to begin our budget on the revenue side. If you're saying that we didn't expend all the money that we received from the revenues, and that money has gone right back into the general fund, because now we're saying we're back up at 3.5 instead of down at 2.9 from the 18-19, then that tells me that we haven't spent any of those fund balance appropriated, and so why would we be looking at raising taxes?
We have vacant positions in departments, and I believe the history of Mineral Wells is probably doing the same as it's done in the past. Fully budget for a full staff at all times, whether the positions, and full retirement funding, full social security funding, because that is the fiscally responsible thing to do. And if the positions are vacant for long periods of time, like we've had, I believe, positions vacant all year in the police department and several months in other departments. So that is going to, we aren't gonna dip into that fund balance in the way that maybe we would have.
Yeah, that's a true statement. Yeah, that's absolutely true for this year, for sure.
But I think instead of, I am still waiting on what changes you wanna make to this document, because otherwise this conversation is a waste of time. Stop beating him up and you say,
I'm not
as the
beating
mayor,
him up.
what changes you wanna make?
I'm trying to understand where we're sitting on our budget. If we are over budget, under budget from our current year, that helps me understand this. I just now found out that the first budget I had wasn't the accurate budget. So I need to go by this one that's sitting in
That
front of me.
wasn't a budget in there, there was a copy, there was some printouts of some spreadsheets.
Okay, it's just, well, it's
What
got
you're
all the.
looking at is the budget.
So you're saying this first one wasn't the budget?
It's the first draft.
Do you wanna play games, or do you wanna talk about the budget?
I'm asking the question.
That's not a relevant question as I see it. I told you what document you need to be looking at, it's that one right there.
Well, I tried getting a hold of you this week, never got a hold of you. And I've been asking and spending a lot of time wasting on that other one after I got this one. And I didn't realize until I saw both of them side by side that the numbers were different. So I'm just trying to understand what the goal is of council.
Council, does anyone else have any questions or discussion? Things that you've noted?
I wanted to hear from the public tonight and see if there's any public comments on what we have so far, is kind of what I was interested in.
I agree. We'd have to open the hearing, I believe in all that.
Did y'all not have any other questions?
My questions were answered early on with your commentary, like with the street sweeper and things like that, so those were the things I didn't know.
And I've called the finance director in past weeks, as well as the city manager, and gotten several questions answered that were just general questions I had.
It's great, I've called, left messages, and like a meeting as well. If y'all don't have any questions, I'll be prepared for questions when we come next week. If there's no other questions, then yeah, I'll open it up. I'd like to open the public hearing at 6:41. Regarding the proposed City of Interwell's 2019-2020 annual budget and discuss the alcohol tax rate for 2019.
Do we just walk up?
Yeah, you know what, the best way, I guess we'll just start with whoever's closest and work back. Unless if you wanna go first, you can.
I don't care.
It doesn't matter to me.
Do I have to get up, or can I just do?
Can y'all hear her?
Yeah,
I'm fine, I think it's fine.
I'm just, what is the proposed increase? What is the proposed increase that y'all are wanting?
As it sits, it's just over 3 cents, I believe, let me find
What was it last year?
it. With debt service and everything, we were sitting at 65, let me find it. Last year we were, 65,907,644, that includes our debt service.
Uh-huh.
This year, it's looking at .69138821, is that correct?
16912 would be the total rate.
So we're
Yeah,
like,
oh, sorry, 6912.
so 3 cents,
3 cents.
so, and that's with it, that includes all the stuff for the police department, that.
Vehicles,
The
that's-
income, okay.
The step raises,
The
there's
step raises, the new positions that you're,
6 new positions.
and then does that include Mr. Hawes's, or?
That includes,
So-
economic development as well as new salaries.
And how much revenue is that 3 cents gonna bring in?
About 150,000.
Sure we want that. I personally, I don't think that's, to keep this momentum that we have going in the city, I don't think that is a bad rate for our return on our investment. I think it's, and I know that people don't want to raise their taxes, but I think that what we've got going on right now is a good thing. And, with the school board doing what it did, reducing our taxes, for 2020, I guess, but reducing our taxes, you know that's gonna bring in more teachers to live here, to buy houses, to do that. So I just think that it's a win-win. And I've never been one, you guys know me, I've never been one that wanted taxes to go up. I never cared what the police money.
It looks like on the property taxes, it would be planned to bring in 4.455 million versus 3.989 million, so about just over $500,000 in more revenue.
And that's not all if I could, that's not all based on current property. You know, you have to look at the effective tax rate, which is calculated based on the same properties that were taxed last year. And so the total ad valorem tax up about $500,000. Some of that's new growth. And the actual impact of the tax increase is about $190,000 on comparable properties from one year to the next, if that makes any sense.
And one more question, I have a question. Does anybody know what the sales tax revenue has been since the downtown has been what kind of percentage it's increased? Is that?
Pretty flat, I thought.
Yeah, we're not seeing a whole lot yet, honestly. I think we will, but this year we really didn't project much of an increase in sales tax. Obviously, that's an item that, in the event that the city does see those sales tax collections increase this year, that will be added revenue to the budget that we did not depend on yet. Which I think is wise budgeting. Sales tax is volatile, and you don't want to budget speculatively on sales tax because it may not come in. If it does, I think we'll all be real pleased with that.
So, if people want to boycott businesses, it would make the taxes go up even higher?
The revenue would have to come from somewhere,
Yeah.
and the services would have to be cut. Yes, ma'am.
Jenny, they're projecting about $75,000 more in sales tax this year.
Okay.
So not a whole lot, but
At least it's up and not. Yeah, it is.
Any other questions, Jenny? Go ahead.
No.
Yeah.
You can stand up or you can come up here, whichever you're comfortable with.
Okay. We the people out there on North Keller Road, out there in Hideaway Acres Edition, have been waiting for over 30 years for y'all to release the bond money to fix our water lines out there. When y'all bought our water system, we had to take this matter to it was a different council than y'all. But we had to take the matters to a court because the city of Mineral Wells illegally bought our water co-op. And part of the lawsuit was y'all was supposed to upgrade our water lines on Hideaway Acres Edition. Y'all turned our water pressure tank off. You cut the line to the water pressure tank. If somebody's taking a shower at one of the houses that live down there, you're gonna get a trickle out of the faucet. Y'all passed 2 bonds to get this done. The first bond was spent in Las Vegas because I remember David May wrote up a big article because that city manager got fired because he took and misappropriated bond money to Las Vegas.
Point of order, I'm not sure that those are charges that can be substantiated, I mean, without
can be
quite a bit of
substantiated.
research. Point of order, I think that's a personal
David May
attack.
wasn't the newspaper guy 30 years ago.
No,
I don't
but
think.
it was in the newspaper. I remember
Okay.
it was in the newspaper. And we found out that the city of Mineral Wells bought our water co-op, Indian Creek now. It was Brazos River Water Authority. We were part of the Brazos River Water Authority. We had membership. We found out that the city council at that time bought our water district without our vote. My parents settled on it. Everybody settled with the city. The part of the settlement was y'all was supposed to fix our water lines out there because our water lines are household water lines. They are not capable of handling pressure. This addition was built over 40 years, 40 years ago. Cause I'm gonna be 54 this
Point of
year.
order though, real quick, we can't even legally address this issue tonight because it's not, part of the budget with the public hearing. I'm not saying we don't wanna hear about it, but is it something that we can
But
discuss after the
Yes,
meeting?
it's part of your budget because it's part of the water thing, because I have to always fight with City Hall to get a water tap out there. I got 2 now. I gotta finish paying the down payment to get my water on out there. But I've had to fight twice with City Hall because I've gone down to the water department down there on South Oak, and they had to refer me to City Hall. Lance Howardson took care of it because I had to talk to Lance. I got a contract with Lance and the city council. I don't know if you guys were on it this year when I got the paperwork done. But I had to talk with Lance again because I'd sold that water meter to my nephew. I let him have that water connection, and I'm trying to put another water connection out there. Well, I had to fight with the water company again. They says we can't put a water tap out there because the water lines are overloaded like they are. And they are. And there's been 2 bonds that was passed to fix it. And we've been waiting for over 30 years for it to be fixed. when is the water district going to go out there and fix it? Because if you turn on that new main that goes out to Indian Creek out there, you're gonna blow our water lines. Cause those are household water lines that run down there. They ain't that big.
Sir, could I ask a clarifying question of the staff that might help us figure out if we're gonna be able to address that? I guess the question is, are there any funds budgeted to fix the water issue on North Taylor Road? Is that your question?
No, it's on Hideaway Acres.
I'm sorry,
Edition.
Highway Acres, sorry. Are there any, do we have anything in the works to deal with that issue?
That's part of phase 2 and phase 3 of the 180 water line going out west.
And that's going out for bid soon,
Yes.
okay.
And if you guys turn that on, you're gonna blow our water out there. Our water lines has not had pressure in over 30 years. Those water lines that go down there to all those houses down there have not had any pressure in them for over 30 years. You jack pressure down them lines and see what happens. You're gonna start blowing water lines. Cause those water lines are the same type of water lines that you use
Terry,
for your house.
Just keep addressing us. I think if the water lines are busted and it's on us or the contractors, then correct me if I'm wrong, we'll be the ones fixing it, correct?
Well,
Well, the whole thing needs to be replaced.
yeah, I'm not familiar with that project, Mayor. I think it probably would be appropriate that that'd be probably the discussion that we have, with our engineers as we begin looking at the design of that project to see, I don't know exactly what that project entails, but certainly there should be consideration for.
I can take any one of y'all out there. I could take y'all out there. I could show you the water pressure tank that you turned off on us. Now, right now I'm using my sister's water. which
So
I'm
we're not
really
gonna accomplish
glad.
anything with this tonight. It'd probably be best if we have, maybe you and I can have, and Bob can meet sometime in the next few days.
That's
Because we're
fine,
not gonna
I just
solve
need
this
to know
tonight.
where this bond money is, because we've been waiting for over 30 years patiently waiting out there on Hideaway Acres Edition.
I don't
And
think anybody in here.
it hasn't been
has the answer for
addressed.
you on that.
Yeah,
And I figured tonight was a budget hearing, that it would be the best time to address the council. Is there gonna be a budget to help us out there? Or y'all are gonna continue to just charge us the water rates,
Will you do this for me?
and that's it?
When, can you meet with Terry?
Yeah, sounds like from what Bob's saying, we've already got plans to
If y'all
make some changes.
meet and they bring it back and give us some numbers from staff on how much it's gonna cost, and we will try and fit in, we've got another 2-3 weeks of budget work, so.
I'd be glad to meet with anybody. I just need to know, when's this bond money gonna be spent?
And like I said, there's no one up there that's gonna be able to answer that question for you, or that.
Okay.
Sounds like there's already some plans in place to do that. It just
Well, the
maybe-
plans have been in place 30 years ago.
Well, I don't know anything about 30 years ago.
I know, it was before you, and Lance had started coming on when the city manager got fired for misappropriating funds in Las Vegas. They had passed a second bond to replace some of the bond money that was lost down in Vegas. They fired him.
Point of order, I'm not sure that that's
And-
something we need to be talking
Did he
about at
win
this
in
meeting.
Vegas or did he lose it all?
Yeah.
I don't know what he did in Vegas.
We can, if you'll give Peggy your name and number, sir, we'll get, well, I will call you and we'll set up a time that we can have a more intimate conversation with you. Let me see if we get some answers. If that's okay with the council.
Terry, did you have any other things you need to bring up, or is that it?
I know I'm not part of the city, but I got another question. Why is people being allowed in the Nazareth the Nazareth Hospital? I'm just kinda curious. I've been seeing people going in and out of there on the ghost walks, and I even got pictures of people being in the lobby. Is there supposed to be a reason for that?
I don't think anyone up here is gonna know that.
They're
answer.
cleaning it up.
Cleaning it up.
Well, that's a
Cleaning it up.
private business, so
I'm
it's not
talking
in our
on the
budget.
ghost walk. They've been allowing people to go in and on the ghost walk.
Typically, the protocol for a public hearing is not an exchange of information back and forth between the council.
Oh, I was just
because
wondering if
they're just
it
here
was
basically
all right for them to
input.
be in there, cause I didn't know if it was safe for people to be in there. I've just been seeing people going in.
That'd be a good question to address with, city manager when you meet. with
Okay,
him.
no problem. You just.
I'm sorry I jumped the lectern from that gentleman. I don't have any questions about your budget or our budget. What I heard about the senior center sounded mighty fine to me. So I hope that proposed will be adopted in the budget. I don't have any concerns like the gentleman who just preceded me, although I think those are pretty interesting concerns. I'm sure you're interested as well. But I do want to say, in all of my life, I never thought I would ever live in Mineral Wells, Texas, because I just never thought about Mineral Wells, Texas. But I came here 4 years ago as the volunteer coordinator for Meals on Wheels, and now I'm the executive director of the Senior Center. What excites me about Mineral Wells is really a new sense of attitude and of growth ever since the idea became a reality about the Baker Hotel. What I've noticed is a lot of vacant lots now have signs in them from realty companies. I'm not gonna say they're gonna sell overnight, but it seems to me to show an interest and a positivity about what can happen here in Mineral Wells. I probably won't live the rest of my life here unless I go home and die tonight. But I am excited about what I'm experiencing here now. And I'm excited that we have a city council who I believe can work hand in hand with all of those persons at the dais and upon the podium. I think whatever else we do, we must remain positive and moving forward. And if I hear of things that are going to be regressive, then I will stand up and say something about them, because I'm not afraid to. So thank you for this moment. This is my first council meeting. I'm hoping it will be my last council meeting, get 2 in 1, because my interest is pretty limited for what y'all discuss most often, but my interest is broad for the city of Mineral Wells. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question while you're up here?
Pardon me?
You're the director of the Senior Center?
I am the director of the Senior
Fantastic.
Center.
Just what are your thoughts on if you had someone on staff full-time that was searching and writing grants, would that be a benefit to your association?
We do write grants.
All right, so do you have someone full-time that's all they spend time
No,
working
we
on?
don't, but I have a person who's about the best grant writer I know who writes grants for us.
How much money do you think y'all pull in with grant writing then, with her expertise?
Well, as soon as I have a grant I want to go after, I'll tell you.
The reason I was asking is if it makes sense on the finances, why not look at pulling money that we have right now for nonprofits so that we can hire a grant writer who can write exclusively for all the nonprofits. And you could even do it trial run of it. You could do it for 1 year, keep their financing in place, and then put a grant writer that's also writing at the same time and see who comes up with more money, the taxpayer or the grant writer. Especially someone who's full-time dedicated to it. That was number one. And the other thing I was gonna ask is, do y'all have any endowments set up?
No.
No, have y'all, cause there's, I know that was really a great revenue source, is doing endowments when you can offer free wills, and then most people set up an endowment for that organization. That would be a great, I'm suggesting it because it's something that maybe we can consider as council in providing for nonprofits, where we can combine with someone to help them write a will, and perhaps we'll set up an endowment for those individual nonprofits. Just wanted to talk about different ideas.
Let me just say, my experience of the Senior Center has not progressed a great deal since that 40-year-old grant from the city that you've heard. We are totally dependent upon profits from fundraising and some grants. But these are the grants that come from the city, that come from the county, that come from the Brazos Foundation, those kinds of things. I am investigating other avenues of grants that we could receive.
One thing I saw that was interesting when I was looking into it, a lot of the nonprofits actually get their funding source through the Chamber of Commerce, and I know we got a lot of chamber meeting members on here. The chambers work hand in hand with all the business owners. The chamber seems like an ideal fit for being able to house the funding mechanism for a lot of these nonprofits, and there's a lot of cities that would do that. It's just another idea for us to just consider. I'm just giving ideas to consider, because there's better ways to fund things, I believe, than just always pulling from taxes.
Well, I know from your history that you're not for doing that, and I can understand your
Not
point.
doing what?
Using taxes to fund nonprofits.
No, actually, that was totally misconstrued when that was put on the agenda. We had an article written out before I was even able to speak. All the nonprofits stood up and spoke against me without even hearing from me.
Well,
And I would love to address it if you'd like. Those are some of the ideas that you can put in place.
well, why don't you send me some recommendations and we can all work on that together?
I'm happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that has any comments? There's no one else. I saw Paul standing out there earlier, so I don't know if he's done or not. I guess we will call it a day if there's no one else.
I only briefly wanna address the Chamber of Commerce, I mean, only because I feel like
Yeah, let's sit. Certainly.
that's some misinformation, they don't fund nonprofits.
They, and I know our chamber doesn't. There are
Okay.
chambers that do.
Okay, well, I didn't want, the information sounded like our chamber does that, but, that's really clear
Yeah,
that
no,
up.
our chamber does not. I was suggesting it because if you think about it, the Chamber of Commerce works with all the businesses. And most of the funding for the nonprofits comes from businesses that are for-profit giving donations. It makes a good sense to make hand-in-hand to have the Chamber of Commerce to help house some of that. They can either get, there's hundreds of ideas out there for it. Just wanting us to consider and see if there's any other options that you are even willing to consider. If there's no other.
I think on that issue, you know, I'm all for growing our community's wealth through enhancing the strength of our nonprofits. But if you have a proposal, a solid proposal to do that where we could actually pro-con it, let's look at it. But, you know, we would need to see, you know, like something on paper. But because, I mean, I can say, you know, nonprofit fundraising is hard. You know, writing grants is hard. Getting money from foundations is hard. So it's easy to say you should go get a grant and you should hire a grant writer. But from personal experience, I think it's, you know, kind of an insult to the nonprofits to say, well, I just think we should do something different without a rock solid proposal. But I am interested in other ways to do this, absolutely.
I mean, no insult to the nonprofits. My master's degree is tailored into that for the nonprofits, so I figured I would be.
How much money have you personally raised for nonprofits? Let's lay it on line.
Not sure.
Okay, but if you have a proposal, let's look at a proposal. Otherwise, we talked about this last year.
About the revenue plan that I shared, that y'all didn't want me sharing with everybody.
That didn't have anything to do with nonprofits.
Well, you said you talked about this last year. We didn't really talk
No,
about.
I was talking about the nonprofit.
Okay. I guess the question to council is, are we even wanting to consider, cause I can acquiesce and y'all are gonna win every vote 6-1. I won't ask any questions, I won't offer any suggestions or ideas, because if they're met with this consternation, then I'm not here to just take everybody else off. I have honest ideas that I thought would be helpful for our town to look at and to consider, but if that's not a desire of this council, then I'll lock it up at this point and not worry about it.
Excuse me, Mayor, are you gonna close the public hearing?
Yes, if there's no one else wanting to speak, then we are closing this public hearing at 7:03.
I would be interested in, considering a grant writer, not only for nonprofits, but for the city in general. I think that position is something that, could be very beneficial, not only for nonprofits, but for, citywide. I don't know whether this particular budget year is where it fits, but since you mentioned it, I'm gonna start thinking about it. Thank you.
I believe that was mentioned last year as well, but I would love us to consider it. Do y'all have any, we've already got the next date set for the next public hearing, correct? It's in 2 weeks?
Yes, 27th of August and then the 3rd of September will be the next two.
Do we need to have a motion for that to be voted on, or we good?
You actually, in my mind, they're set, but if you.
I think the only thing we voted on last time was tonight, so I think we do need to vote.
So that'd be August 27th and September the 3rd.
Alright, I'll take a motion if someone has it, if that works with everyone's schedule.
I make a motion that we schedule a special meeting to discuss the proposed budget and conduct a public hearing and to take record vote if needed for August 27th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion passes 7-0.
I'm sorry, who seconded, please?
Reagan.
Or, yeah,
Oh,
she can have it.
I'm sorry, what's your who?
Either one.
Yeah, just do it.
Okay.
You know, Chris, I don't think any of us.
And did we want to, excuse me, did we want to set a public hearing? You didn't call for September 3rd.
I thought that was a regular meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a regular meeting.
I'm sorry.
Alright, that being business, no other business, I'd like to
I
adjourn
would
this meeting.
just,
I'm sure he's not gonna take those.